There's been a lot of talk last few days about possible World War III, nuclear warfare. I live in Washington. We have a lot of, um, you know, reasons why we could get attacked here. And I have been hearing a lot of prophecies surrounding this, actually, thinking back for years. The last Trump, and just where technology is at. Well, I think it's really important. I hope, I've been preparing my kids for what could happen if they end up in a Daniel story where they are children who are taken from their parents, or if something happens to my husband and I. I'm trying to build into them spiritual strength, values, and ideas, and a good spiritual foundation so that it can get them through those times if they have to survive something without mom and dad. And mostly what I'm talking about is their spiritual strength. So teaching them not to fall into unforgiveness and bitterness and fear, but being strong, knowing that after this life, this life was only ever meant to be temporary, and after this life is something more real and something better, and that all that they need to focus on is keeping themselves pure no matter what, them maintaining spiritual strength and maintaining their goodness no matter what happens to them. The Bible says, don't fear him who can destroy the body, but fear him who can destroy both the body and the soul. A woman was prophesying about a dream that she had, or a vision, and it was like a war scene. And at one point, after she had been running, it seemed like there was no other direction to go except for down this spiral staircase. And what lit off in my head is, when you're being pursued and it seems like you've reached the end, and a lot of us Christians might face this, don't go down that spiral staircase, even though it looks like an escape, because it's a deception. We can't spiritually lower ourselves and walk down that spiral staircase where we choose to have hate and evil and a lack of compassion and unforgiveness or selfishness. You have to maintain that understanding that your spiritual body is so much more important than your physical body. And in the book The Man's Search for Meaning, by Viktor Frankl, he's a man who survived the Holocaust, and he was a psychiatrist living through it. And he observed people, and he observed the people who did better and actually ended up surviving were the people who remained altruistic and had good characters, whereas the people who devolved into cannibalism and selfishness and betrayal of their own people, those people didn't fare well and didn't survive physically. The people who died spiritually also ended up dying physically and just becoming a creature that didn't seem human anymore, versus the people who tried to make the most out of the situation by being unselfish and trying to take care of other people, even though they themselves were greatly suffering and maybe hours away from death or a couple of days away from death. They continued to find a way to contribute goodness and give their light, and those are the people who ended up surviving, even if they had started off physically weaker than others. And it's not just all about surviving. it's also about doing God's will, and we're supposed to endure until the end. And I don't know what we're going to have to endure, but seems there are sure a lot of prophecies surrounding this that are coming true now, about wars happening. And I've been wondering myself, I've been seeing the contractions of the end times, and I know that we've had a rest period for a little while, and I know that it's time probably for another contraction that may be stronger than the last one. But through it, we need to remember that the pain has a purpose. It gets us closer to the end, and we anticipate it. As Christians, we know that we're going through end times. We know that we're going to experience another contraction, and it's intermittent. We know that the periods of contractions, even though they seem difficult to endure, they are only temporary, and then we have a moment of respite and rest in between the contractions, and this is all part of God's plan. But I think it's really important that we never deny Jesus. Those who deny Jesus, he will deny before the Father, and those who will lose their life for his name's sake will gain their life. And so you just have to remember what's important. Try to remove attachment to this world and ask God for strength. Another thing I've been telling my kids is you're never alone. You have God, because I know that in wars, there's a possibility people, even children, end up being alone. And I want to instill in them memories and things that they can draw from in those desperate times, like knowing that God has a plan. There's meaning for suffering. He works all things for good for those who follow his commands, for those who love him. And if they're ever lonely, they can always pray to God, and he is always there. And just know not to be afraid, because everybody dies, and the life is only temporary, the body's only temporary, and what comes next is something good. And the most important thing is that they just don't give themselves over to evil or unforgiveness or bitterness or darkness in any way, because it's their soul that wins the battle. It's their soul that has to overcome in order to have that hope of a good future after the bodily life is over. So I wanted to share that message with any of you who watch my channel, because it's good for any people of any age to remember these things. And God bless you, and I hope, I wish you well, and I hope that we'll see each other on the other side if the unlikely event that we actually get nuked comes to pass. Amen.